right, we are in our second match. Unfortunately, we are on the draw. And we're just going to keep this. So this is what you can do when you have Ponder in your deck. Obviously, this may still end up bad for us, but the fact that we can consider keeping this hand and actually have it end up being fine is, you know, one of the reasons why I like this deck so much and think it's so strong, because we get to keep hands that other decks cannot. And, I mean, this hand's great now, right? Our Rishkar is just going to be better. Oh, look at that. He's got the 1-mana spell. Very smooth. Walking Ballista. Good to know about. And he can play that at quite a large size. It's probably actually worth it. Oh. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. If our opponent plays a land drop, he can play a 3/3 Walking Ballista. That's not too devastating yet, but certainly makes playing our Gideon a little tricky. May want to consider playing Gideon and just making an emblem. That's interesting. Seems like it would be well worth it to just make it bigger. But now that we're here, so our opponent can't kill our Gideon if we play it. I think we just play the Gideon. Be nice if I could use this mana. I mean, I could play a 3/3 Walking Ballista, but I kind of want to capitalize on this opportunity of being able to play Gideon here. If we get into a board stall, obviously Walking Ballista is really good and I can shoot stuff down, but right now it's only a 2/2. Takes a lot of mana to add counters, and we're still at the early stage in the game where Walking Ballista probably isn't going to do a whole lot. And unfortunately, we can't really attack. It's a little annoying. Although I guess actually we could attack with this knight and our Gideon. And that would be relatively safe. Could actually probably attack with Gideon, knight, and Rishkar at our opponent's Gideon. Actually, maybe I don't want to attack with. Oh, my opponent can actually make this his Ballista 4/4. What's going on here? So that's 3/3. And if my opponent lets the knight through, I can finish it off with my own Walking Ballista. Oh, this is actually great for me, because as soon as the Walking Ballista has 2 damage on it, it will only be able to shoot something else once. So I'll be able to kill my opponent's Walking Ballista and take minimal damage to my own. Although that would leave... So if I just play a 3/3 Walking Ballista, then it would basically be a chump blocker for my opponent's Gideon, which I guess is fine. So I'm definitely putting my Gideon at risk. And probably the best thing my opponent can do is just knock a counter off my Gideon with his Walking Ballista. Because his Walking Ballista has 2 damage on it, he can't remove 3 counters. Because as soon as he pays 1, it'll just instantly die. He can't like respond to dying. And my opponent will have a counterattack on my Gideon, but I can chump block with my Walking Ballista and deal some damage to my opponent's Gideon. And potentially eat something with the Sylvan Advocate. Unless my opponent has a removal spell, in which case it's going to be pretty tough. But pretty sure if my opponent is able to kill my Gideon, there's a good chance I'll be able to kill his. Ooh, Gearhulk. Well, that changes things quite a bit. Now my opponent will have multiple things that can kill my Gideon. So now my Gideon's just toast, I think. Definitely unfortunate. So I'm going to have a 5-power Sylvan Advocate to attack my opponents. That part's good. So, I mean, technically, well, I could trade. I don't think I want to trade. I think I want, yeah, I think I'll let that go. So I think start by attacking my opponent's Gideon. So the main thing that I'm worried about is my opponent drawing another Walking Ballista. That'd be pretty annoying. And I could play a Thalia. but it would require me tapping one of my creatures. And I could also, I think actually playing the Thalia is a good idea. Doesn't really block anything, but it makes a counterattack on my opponent's Gideon a lot easier. I think is fairly important. If I lose my Gideon, I want to make sure that I can take care of his, or at least threaten a really big counterattack on his life total. My opponent has another big 5-drop here. A little debatable here, what is my most expendable creature between Rishkar and Thalia. Thalia does some good work, but Rishkar is pretty big enabler for Walking Ballista. And I'm not sure what my opponent has here, but these are the obvious blocks. That seems pretty bad for my opponent. Ooh, Ajani. So my opponent could have an Avacyn. But yeah, I don't think my opponent can protect his Gideon. If I attack with Advocate plus Gideon. And if my opponent has an Avacyn, let's finish this off and see what happens. Alright, so my opponent doesn't seem to have Avacyn. So so yeah, I can just do it all, as they say. And my opponent's yeah. My opponent's Verdurous Gearhulk looked good when it came on the board, but you know, it wasn't good enough. So I have to admit I haven't thought a ton about the mirror. But Quarantine Field is pretty nice because it kills planeswalkers, but I feel like there's going to be some natural states running around. I don't actually want to bring in my own natural states. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in these 2 Fumigates and extra planeswalkers and trim the Thalias. Linvala's actually been really good in my experience. I'm going to try. Oh, do I want to trim the Heart of Kiran? I'll trim the Pacifist. Trading Heart of Kiran for a natural state is like not that big of a deal, but trading Quarantine Field for natural state, it's probably going to be a pretty big blowout. Oh, I actually don't need this Blossoming Defense, I think. Keep the Lambholt Pacifist in so I don't get run over. So it's a little interesting having Fumigate rather than Descend upon the Sinful, but I don't think my opponent's going to have Avacyns. We're a little high on the Planeswalker count. Instead of this Linvala, let's just have this Descend. I think my opponent's going to be tapping out a lot, and I think that, the sweepers are going to be pretty powerful. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. You'll notice that I didn't bring in the natural states, although they certainly can have a worthwhile application in this matchup. But I think it's going to come down to like a mid-range slugfest, and I just want like more powerful cards. Yeah, I'll go for Gideon. Last game was actually pretty interesting with the way that everything played out. I mean, there was a moment there where it seemed like we were neck and neck, and then all of a sudden I was just like, felt like I was just infinitely far ahead. Ooh, that's good. It's actually not worth it for me to attack, unfortunately. Actually, I guess I would be pretty happy to trade my Pacifist for my opponent's Rishkar. Because him getting to use the mana out of it's like really powerful. And I would trade my Rishkar for his. Even though I have this Walking Ballista in my hand. I think Walking Ballista is really powerful in this matchup, but I don't think you want to like focus on it too much as your primary game plan, because it is oh, there we go. Because it is just so mana intensive. So, and it's not like Pack Rat where it starts out kind of slow and then snowballs. All right, so what do I want to do here? I can't really protect my Gideon, so it doesn't seem worth it to play it. I could play a Gideon and Emblem. That would be okay. Play Gideon, Emblem. Play another dude. So I have 6 mana this turn. I think maybe what I want to do is Oath for a Plains. We found it. So now I can play Avacyn and Walking Ballista for 0, and I can wipe my opponent's board and knock his Gideon to 1. So I'll be trading my Walking Ballista and Rishkar for both my opponent's creatures and a fair amount of loyalty on the Gideon. I think that's worth it. My opponent could have something like Stasis Snare, which would be really bad. But my other options like aren't very good, I don't think. I think this is like my best path to victory. I also don't think my opponent has Avacyn. I think my opponent's basically copied the list from the Star City top 8. If this doesn't work, it's pretty bad, because not only is it a Stasis Snare that's 2 for 1-ing my Avacyn and Ballista, it also means that my entire team's going to be tapped down, and I'm going to take a ton of damage, and my opponent's going to, basically just be like way, way ahead. But if he doesn't have Stasis Snare, there's a good chance that we're going to be able to get ahead. We'll see what happens here. A lot hinges on this play working. If it was just like a normal ground battle, I could play my own Gideon and make a token and, sort of stall out the board. But the fact that my opponent has this Heart of Kiran is a real problem. So the fact that my opponent hasn't done anything yet seems pretty good for me. Right? So now I wonder if my opponent has a Walking Ballista in his hand. Because if he attacks with the Heart of Kiran, and I block, a Walking Ballista could finish off my Avacyn. Pretty reasonable play would be for my opponent just plus his Gideon and attack with both before playing any spells. I probably wouldn't block, take 9 damage, go to 10. That would put me at a pretty low life total. And that would still give him the option to potentially kill my Avacyn with a Walking Ballista plus Heart of Kiran. Why he goes for the token. The Gear Hulk, the Ballista. So now Gideon's definitely gonna. Oh no, Gideon's not definitely gonna die. I guess I'll have to Emblem and then attack Gideon. But it actually doesn't leave me in the best position, but I'll have to do. Certainly can't block here. Well, actually, could I? Probably not. Emblem time. So this is still not a particularly exciting or great position for me. But could be worse. A land drop on this upcoming turn would be really good. That I can play both my cards. Gearhulk would be super annoying. Oh, Ajani! No! That's going to be difficult for me to beat. Now I don't even want to play my Gideon, but I kind of have to. Maybe I should have the quarantine fields in instead of the sweepers. It's pushing damage. Can't really imagine that I lived through this. Actually, maybe I should have just played the Gideon and made a knight. Even though it would just die. Gearhulk and another Ajani. Alright, I'm just gonna see this one. Opponent's so far ahead on the board. Let's get rid of these Fumigates. And descends. Get these quarantine fields back in. I guess maybe the Thalias are good at attacking planeswalkers. I think this is cut out for this. I wonder how many Heart of Kirans my opponent has. Like, maybe it's a mistake not to have any natural states. Just don't know. I don't think I would want two natural states. This is actually a situation where I'd really like an Angelic Purge. Yeah, we're gonna need to put an Angelic Purge in this sideboard. Alright, well I might get blown out, but I'm gonna play the two Quarantine Fields. Just play it like this. This is basically my main deck configuration. I just took out the main deck Blossoming Defense for a second Ajani Unyielding. We'll keep. Don't have a 2-drop, but hopefully we can find one with the Oath of Nissa. After that, hopefully find another land that comes into play untapped. So that is a 2-drop, and we'll take it, I guess. I'm really hoping that I draw a basic land. Oh, actually, another Fortified Village is just fine. And if our opponent doesn't have any early disruption for our draw, it's actually looking to be quite good. Wow, no attack. Seems a little on the side. Yeah, and this Thraven Spectre, even though it's cantripping, it seems a lot worse than like Sylvan Advocate. So we got some options here. I think what I actually want to do is play the Thalia, just because it makes defending this Nissa so difficult, as well as playing a Gideon. But I mean, just playing my own Gideon kind of does a lot of the same. I think I'd rather just play my own. Yeah. And here I could like play another land drop, pump up my Walking Ballista, and then finish the Nissa off and keep my Walk Ballista. But I think it's just more powerful for me to play this Gideon. Between Thalia and Ajani, it seems like I should be able to press the advantage and run away with the game, but we'll see. My opponent certainly has some counterplay available. Not a good time for my opponent to be spinning his wheels on cantrips. Not particularly good. I actually want to make an emblem this turn. Wow, my opponent just has no gas. So let's see here. I think I'm just going to attack Nissa with the Rishkar and the Knight and see what happens. I don't think my opponent will go for the double block with the Thraben Inspectors. He is. Alright, so since this is the case, I think I am actually gonna go for the extra board presence here, because I can play Thalia. And my opponent's just gonna have a really hard time doing that. Especially considering I have the Ajani coming up. I would have preferred to play Ajani that turn, and that's why I didn't attack with any of my other creatures. Ajani's just like the more powerful play. But if my opponent goes for the double block with the Thraben Inspectors, this puts him in such a bad position. Because he doesn't have enough mana to kill my Thalia and play powerful blockers. And if he doesn't kill the Thalia, he doesn't really have any, or she doesn't have any good ways of being offensive or defensive. Now in this turn, I should be able to kill both the Gideon and the Nissa. I'm probably going to use Ajani to minus on the plant, but that's okay. Right. So I can plus my Gideon and attack with Rishkar and Ballista on one, Gideon on the other, and then I have 3 blockers. Or I could just emblem attack with these and I still have 3 blockers, so I think I'm going to go for the plus. And there's like no reason for me to attack my opponent's life total at this point. I want to protect my planeswalkers so that they can continue generating value, and I just want to make sure my opponent can't generate value off of his. I know my opponent has a Canopy Vista because he revealed it to Fortified Village, which still came into play tapped beside Thalia. But now that I have 2 planeswalkers, Thalia making things extra difficult for my opponent, and a Walking Ballista that I can sink mana into, seems like a very secure position for myself. This and a Ajani for my opponent. Oh, he's got the quarantine field. I'll be going after my planeswalkers. At least that's what I would assume. Yeah. Well, they've certainly done a fair amount. But that's certainly what my opponent needs to turn this game around. Wow, Avacyn's actually real nice. Makes it a lot harder for anything to go wrong. Oh, hello, Gideon. So I can just shove with a bunch of stuff. And I'm 1 mana short of keeping my Rishkar back and having enough mana to level up my Walking Ballista. If I was my opponent, I would actually consider just taking all the damage. What if my opponent has a sweeper like Fumigate? Now that I've seen Quarantine Field out of my opponent, I would definitely want Natural State in my deck. This seems like a super bad spot for my opponent. Can't imagine what he could have here other than a sweeper. Wow, and he has the Fumigate. We've got ourselves a game. Crazy. And to be fair, our opponent has 4 cards in his hand, so it's possible that he's in a better position than we are, even though we have this Gideon. Don't have enough mana to cast Avacyn and Advocate, which is a little annoying. And I think I'm going to go for the 2/2. So the nice thing about plussing the Gideon was it would mean we could use an emblem to quite good effectiveness. But we don't have that many creatures on the board to make it set emblem useful. In the old green-white mirrors, I really liked emblems because things would so frequently come down to an Avacyn battle. Ooh, Ajani. Well, I'm certainly happy that I put another creature onto the board. My opponent's just going for the Forest Fortified Ability? Or Fortified Village? Wow, he whiffed? Jeez, that's really unlucky. So that was a good draw. I think that I'll plus this. Can't imagine. No, there's nothing my opponent could have that would actually kill one of my creatures here. Oh, I guess he could actually have Blessed Alliance. That'd be super annoying. Well, I think I'm just gonna attack Ajani and see what happens. Really hope he doesn't have Blessed Alliance. And I think I'm gonna try to flash an Avacyn this turn. I could try to play around another sweeper by holding it up also. Like, depending on what my opponent does here, I may consider not playing the Avacyn and just doing nothing. Wow, so that's pretty brutal and good for us. One of the reasons I like Avacyn rather than Verdur's Gearhulk. Although to be fair, Verdur's Gearhulk in hand plus this a Gideon on table would be quite good, but so how much damage can I deal here? So 4, 8, 10, 12, 17. So I guess I just go for a kill here and hope that it's good. Wow. And it's good.